Is Denver Broncos quarterback Bo Nix, are the footwork issues we are seeing with him correctable? We believe they are. We'll tell you how he can do that, and the coaching staff can do it, and much more in today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, Broncos Country? Welcome into another episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you know it's your team every day. Thanks once again, Broncos Country. You guys make the show exactly what it is. So make sure you become an everyday listener. And thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day, wherever you get your podcasts or available on YouTube. Subscribe or follow if you haven't done so already by hitting the button down below. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by our friends over there at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports, joined as always by Sayre Bedinger, Sayre expert, predominantlyorange.com. And look, Sayre, we got a lot to break down here on today's episode of the show. A little bit of a mailbag edition that we got from our viewers and subscribers. A couple of great questions sent in. We'll analyze whether or not the Broncos and not this week, and obviously it's a big matchup against Carolina. Got to take care of business, but Broncos Country wants to know what the season will look like if Denver manages to steal a win against Baltimore or Kansas City in the upcoming games. We'll obviously dive into that. What steps do the Broncos need to take to become a true contender? That's a great question. We'll analyze all of that, but more importantly, I think everyone wants to know, are the issues with Bo Nix and his footwork correctable? Obviously, that question comes in from Smiley Boy 21 on YouTube. And I think this is a great way to start the show here today.
It is. I mean, and it's pressing, obviously, because we saw footwork issues lead directly to some missed throws from Bo Nix in that Broncos romping of the New Orleans Saints on Thursday night. So we know that, I mean, as good as that win was, as good as it felt to get a blowout win, like the Broncos are still capable of being a lot better. And when we looked back at the offseason, all the talking points surrounding the quarterback position, I think everybody felt if the Broncos could get a little bit more consistent play out of the quarterback position, that this team could be pretty darn good in 2024, because we saw signs that the defense was improving. We saw signs of other areas of this roster and team improving as the Broncos won 8 games last year. So getting that quarterback position to be a little more consistent, and the Broncos seem to have the brain trust in place, don't they, Cody? I mean, just about everybody from top to bottom on the offensive side of the ball, whether it's Sean Payton, quarterbacks coach Davis Webb, whether it's, Joe Lombardi, Pete Carmichael, all these different guys out there to help Bo Nix every single day, and what they're seeing on film, I feel like because of how Sean Payton has applauded Bo Nix for not making the same mistake over and over and over again, I feel like this is something that he is going to correct pretty quickly.
Yeah, and look, it's not just like a simple thing of, hey, just set your feet, fire, and throw. Like, ideally, and for every quarterback, that's the case, right? If you set your feet, you fire, throw, I mean, usually you're going to have better results. But the thing with Bo, and I did this on my film breakdown over Mile High Sports, and look, I think another thing too, Broncos Country, check out Tim Jenkins' film breakdowns about the footwork, because Tim's played quarterback at the NFL level. I trust his analysis a lot more, but I think for me, just coaching and looking at the game, like looking where Bo is at, Bo has good footwork for the most part in a lot of situations and on a lot of plays. It's when he starts to get off base a little bit, right? Like, or when he senses pressure. Like, for example, the play where he missed Lucas Kroll or Troy Franklin, the issue that he had there was he went to go climb up in the pocket, but as he was climbing up in the pocket, his hips kind of turned a little bit towards the line of scrimmage, kind of sideways, and he kind of launched it off platform, and it didn't have the trajectory to get to where it needed to be. And quite frankly, it was ugly. It was not a very good play from Bo. The thing I think about Bo's footwork here, Sayre, is I think it's a mental thing that is leading to the physical. And I think something like this requires reps. But the challenge here, Sayre, about getting reps, in practice, you're not getting the same live fire looks that you're getting in an actual game, right? So I think a lot of it is, hey, you got to find a way to settle your nerves down. I think when Bo's in the shotgun, his footwork is pretty good. When he's got a clean pocket, his footwork is pretty good. It's when he's trying to roll out or when he's trying to step up and climb the pocket, win from within the pocket, as Sean Payton wants his quarterback to be able to do from time to time. It's then, okay, maybe his feet get a little bit wider than his base, and that leads to an off-platform throw. Those things are correctable. It's hard to correct in practice when you're not getting those same exact looks that you're going to get in a game. So in my opinion, Sayre, I think it's something that you continue as a coaching staff to preach and to harp on with Bo. And look, Bo knows this as well, but Bo's not oblivious to the fact like, hey, I missed that play right there. I almost threw an interception because of bad footwork as well on a scramble drill. It's more so like, okay, how do I calm this down in the midst of the chaos, right? When everything's happening at the speed in which it is, and you're trying to make a play where everything matters there, that's the challenge. I think that's going to require more reps, and it's certainly something you want to see Bo continue to work on. I know this is something that the coaching staff is cognizant of. Bo is cognizant of this as well, and they are going to work to do that. It's not going to be a simple, hey, you made this mistake, 1 week, the next week it's going to be an issue that doesn't come up. Like, we also see this with other quarterbacks throughout the league, but I think for Bo, it's reducing how often it happens, right? And I think that's going to have to be the key for them going forward.
Yeah, that's exactly it, is making sure you minimize the amount of times that this happens. And like you said, Cody, it's hard to really practice the chaos of a live NFL game when the stakes are high, right? That's why they do those different team periods during training camp. That's why they practice situationally. Even though you can't hit the quarterback, obviously, it gives you an opportunity to feel like those live bullets are flying out there on the field. And so it may come down to Bo kind of rehearsing that, whether it's, outside of practice or things like that, just kind of saying, okay, hey, I'm going to have a coach and a receiver out there with me. I'm going to have somebody kind of run at me as I'm on the move, and I'm going to practice just kind of resetting my feet. And I think that there's such a playmaker gene in Bo Nix that, like, he just wants to make the play happen no matter what. And he's probably been able to make those plays happen, or you have a bit more built-in margin for error at the college and high school levels, right? And we've known this because Bo talked about it. Like, he was the starting quarterback on the varsity team in high school as an 8th grader. And so he's been put out there and asked to do a lot from a very young age. Like, that's just, it's almost written in his DNA to be like, hey, you're the guy out there, go make a play. And so when he's being asked to do that all the time, his whole life, you're asking him to now rewrite that internal clock or whatever it is, So, and I think, what about that throw, Cody, where he missed Lucas Kroll and Troy Franklin? I know that was a huge, that was kind of a viral clip that was going around. I don't necessarily attribute that to footwork in a sense. I mean, maybe to a degree, absolutely. But I kind of feel like I've had times like this out on the backyard playing football, and you're just like, you're throwing it to one guy, then all of a sudden you see somebody coming wide open behind him, and you're like, oh shoot, so you kind of like try to throw it to the guy behind, but also you were throwing to the guy in front, and it lands in no man's land. And I mean, that kind of stuff does happen, right? So I think there are issues with the footwork, but at the same, like that throw in particular, I don't know. I mean, to me, that was like he saw the guy behind the guy that was wide open, and kind of just, like he didn't know exactly what to do in a split second.
I'm not as concerned about Bo's footwork, I think, as everybody else is, right? And certainly you want to correct it because you're missing some plays that could be made due to, a couple of plays where your footwork is questionable or isn't where it needs to be. But I think there's so many examples, and I even showed that in my film review that I did over at Mile High Sports, was the fact that, hey, like, there's plays in this game where Bo is literally, his feet are set. He's finding Devon Bailey. He's finding Troy Franklin. He's rolling out and connecting with Troy Franklin on the run. So it's like, it's not like it's a consistent issue for him, but it's like when it is an issue, it's like, oh, there's a missed play, like a really big play that you could add. Like, Denver could add a touchdown on that play to either Kroll or Franklin because the corner bit up on I think it was Marvin Mims, kind of being a motion guy there, kind of a little bit of a decoy in the backfield. So I'm not as concerned about it, but obviously it's something you want to see addressed a little bit, or you want to see not happen as much going forward here. And look, Broncos Country, I think this is a great question, great way to start off our show, because this is what everyone's talking about on social media right now regarding Bo Nix. Now you get a matchup against Carolina Panthers this week. We'll see where the focus is at here for this Broncos team. But our mailbag episode is going to continue here as well, because we got a question in from a listener and viewer of the show who asks, what do the Broncos need to do to become a true contender? We'll analyze and dive deep into what that may look like here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's episode, Locked On Broncos, is brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play, and you can also do so much more on the same exact page where you place your bets. The Broncos open up this week as 7.5-point home favorites. Hasn't been that way in a while for the Broncos when we talk about the odds here, but Denver's opening up there. If you want to take them on the money line, you're more than able to do that inside of the FanDuel Sportsbook app. You even want to do a same game parlay in this game. FanDuel affords you the opportunity to do just that. Not only just Broncos games, but you can look at a wide slate of NFL games, college games, and obviously with the MLB postseason here, you can get involved in their FanDuel Sportsbook. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's over there at FanDuel.com. Once again, that's FanDuel.com. This show is also brought to you by our friends over there at LinkedIn Jobs. And when you're hiring for your small business, you want to make sure that you find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because LinkedIn Jobs, they have the tools that help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively looking for a new job, but they might be open to the perfect role if it opens up for them. And in a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. And on LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional with LinkedIn. And LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or the resources to hire. Over 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring, so you should as well. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
What do the Denver Broncos need to do to become real contenders in the AFC? Well, we're going to answer that question on today's episode of Locked On Broncos. There may be a lot of things that they need to do. It may be just time. We'll see. Cody and I are going to discuss it and break it down. Another great question sent in by you, the listeners. And hey, thanks so much to all of you that make Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day, especially those of you that have hit the subscribe button wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as on YouTube. So if you haven't done that already, we would really appreciate it if you do so today. And you never know when your question is going to pop up here on Locked On Broncos, as we try to do little mailbag every single week here on the show. Cody, a great question sent in. I'm going to call him Shaggy P, from our friend at Shaggy P on YouTube. I don't know what the rest of that name is. You guys can all look it up in the community tab on YouTube and make your own conclusions there. But Shaggy P is asking this. It's a good question. Like, what do the Broncos need to do in order to become really contenders? I think that what is a contender to me? It's a team that can make it to the playoffs. And if a team can make it to the playoffs, I mean, anything can happen when you get to the dance. There's a lot of NFL teams that are proof of that, including the 2015 Broncos. I know that team was the number one seed in the AFC, but man, that was a brutal year offensively. So you just never know what can happen if you get to the dance. And so I think in order to get to the dance, Cody, what do you think maybe are the top things that this Broncos team needs to do or needs to add or become?
I think Denver defensively is good enough that if they get to the postseason, they could be a dangerous team. The defense, I think, is good enough that'll help them get to the playoffs. And so much of that is, can the offense find a way to click at some point? Can they be more consistent than what we have seen them on a week-to-week basis? Denver's got a good enough defense to get the stops. Do they have a good enough offense, or can they get a good enough offense to the point where they can put points up on the board and take the pressure off of the defense and make things a little bit tougher for opposing teams? I think Denver's revamped front seven has been huge. Obviously, John Franklin Myers. I mean, Sayre, we talk about the pressure rate. I think Denver tied the record in this season of the most pressures in a game from their pass rush standpoint and the quickest time to pressure opposing quarterbacks. You're getting those contributions from your front seven. Your linebackers are playing well. Your secondary's playing well as well. And that's a good formula to have. But for Denver, I think we've seen the formula for them offensively is, okay, Bo Nix is making good decisions for the most part. He's a reason that they're winning. He's not a reason that they're losing games. And if he can continue to find ways to play better, then you're in a good position. But so much, I think, of him finding a way to play better more consistently is all predicated on, can the Broncos run the ball effectively? And certainly in games, we've seen where Denver gets the run game going, it opens things up for Bo in the passing game a little bit. And you start to see them capitalize on some of these shot opportunities. To me, I think that is the formula for them to become a contender. And I think so much of this question is very loaded, right? Because I think you go into every season, Sayre, and everyone asks, okay, who are Super Bowl contenders? I think everyone always looks at Kansas City because until you beat them. That's who the standard is. San Francisco in the NFC. And look, even them being contenders, they're going through their struggles right now in San Francisco. I think you look at Detroit. I think you look at Minnesota. Those teams right now I look at as contenders. What do they have, Sayre, though? They have balance. They have the ability to run the football. They have good quarterback play. They have good defense. Like that, I think, is an example of what we saw this past week. And they have, I think, a good team culture, guys who are bought in. I think Denver's got a great team culture. And I think you have a lot of these guys who are bought in. The only issue standing in Denver's way of, I think, being a playoff contender, and certainly they can get there this year, especially if, like I said, Denver has a chance to get their 5th win of the season this Sunday. If they beat the Carolina Panthers, that's great. And then you have the tough road test, which will lead to one of our other mailbag questions that we have coming up here. I think that Denver's got to just get there, Sayre. You get there, even if you whether you win the division or whether you get a wild card spot, you get there, and then everything changes from the onset for everybody. That's all you need to do. And I think if Denver's able to get a ticket to the dance, I'm excited to see what they can do. Hard to imagine what they have to do to become a contender when we talk about, hey, we're in the preseason. How does this team become a contender? Are they a contender? I think Denver's a young team. They're a little bit of a ways away from that conversation.
Yeah, it requires so much, right? It requires obviously staying healthy. You got to get lucky in the health department. You have to have a talented roster, and you have to have playmakers who will step up in big moments. Do the Broncos have those guys offensively right now? Like we saw last year. I know the Kansas City Chiefs, not a fair curve to grade on, obviously, but what do the Kansas City Chiefs have? Like they had a defense that carried them through the regular season, and then they get to the playoffs, and then you've got an MVP caliber quarterback in Patrick Mahomes, and you've got a playmaker like Travis Kelce who comes through in clutch moments. Like, do the Broncos have those guys, right? We haven't seen them on that stage to really know, and that's the tough part. But I think on paper, you and I talked about this in yesterday's episode when we're talking about making moves at the trade deadline. Like, a lot of moves that are hypothetical right now would upgrade this roster on paper. We have no idea what any of these guys would look like in a playoff atmosphere because, well, we've never seen them in a playoff atmosphere. Like, I think about the Philadelphia Eagles a few years back, Cody. Remember when I think they were 8-9 when Jalen Hurts took over the starting quarterback role, and he kind of was doing a little bit of what we've been seeing Bo Nix do, like utilizing his legs quite a bit, kind of, doing some stuff in the passing game, but the Eagles were like showing like, hey, we could be a tough team. The next team they come out, they're just awesome offensively, things like that. And they get to the playoff stage and all of a sudden they go on this run, right? And so it's just, you don't know what these guys are capable of doing in that environment until they get in that environment. I think it'd be unfair to sit here and say like, oh, yeah, the Broncos definitely have the dogs to get it done in the playoffs. But I also think it's unfair to say like, oh, nope, they definitely don't just because they haven't proven it. I think that's the thing. It's like, let's get to the dance and find out. But do the Broncos have enough talent? Can they stay healthy? Can the defense keep it up? Can they continue to create a pass rush? Like those are the ingredients right there to be effective in the playoffs. If you can rush the quarterback, you can hang with just about anybody, but you also got to score points on the other side.
Yeah, and that's the dilemma. If Denver can find that consistency, there is a conversation to be had. And look, I think the thing I like the most about Denver, they have one of the youngest rosters in the NFL right now. And look, you have, I think, 24, 25 guys on this team right now who are set to become unrestricted free agents. Who does Denver bring back? Like, who does Denver look to add outside of it? Like, that could change it going forward as well. I like the direction Denver is heading with the young team that they have. They have a young nucleus. Sean Payton, certainly in his postgame press conference against the Saints, he said, I really love coaching this young team. And you want to see this young team continue to grow. And you, like I said, before this year, we talked about with the departure of some of the veterans due to, the releases and obviously the Russell Wilson contract situation, Denver has a chance for new voices to emerge. And certainly we have seen that happen this year. That to me, I think is exciting. Does it put Denver in a contender status? Not sure. Like at this point of the NFL season, like, is there really a true contender at this point? I think you obviously have your good teams there. I think Detroit probably might be the one team who's the most consistent offensively, defensively, special teams in all three phases. But it's all about just getting to the dance. We'll reiterate that. The NFL this year has been such a week-to-week league. It's exciting to see how things play out. Denver's got to take care of business this week against Carolina. They got to beat a team that they should beat this upcoming week. We'll see how that comes to fruition. But One of our other mailbag questions that'll round out today's episode of the show comes from a Broncos fan who asked the question as to whether or not with their upcoming road stretch, what would happen if the Broncos suddenly stole one game either against Baltimore or Kansas City? We'll take a look at what that looks like here for this team going forward on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. This show is sponsored by our friends over there at the Game Time app. And look, Game Time has everything that you need, whether you want to go watch a football game this weekend, if you're in Denver, or if you're traveling to Denver, you want to go watch the Broncos take on the Carolina Panthers. The Game Time app will give you the best seats and the best exclusive deals inside of the app. Plus, Game Time just launched a brand new feature called Game Time Picks, where it makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks, they filter out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time filtering through thousands of different tickets and seats. They give you the best ones up front. And on top of that, they also give you all-in pricing where you toggle that feature. It shows you your total up front, so you're not hit with any surprise fees when you check out. Plus, the seat views, you get a panoramic view of what the action is going to look like when you attend from that spot in the seats that you select inside of the Game Time app. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. As we jump in the fourth quarter action on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, we'll continue our mailbag series and we'll answer the question, obviously, that what happens if Denver somehow steals one of the upcoming road wins they're going to have against Baltimore and Kansas City. Real quick, I want to say thanks so much, Broncos Country, for taking time out of your day to listen to us, to watch us talk all things Broncos every single day, all year long. Become an everydayer, become a first listener if you haven't done so already by subscribing or following down below. We appreciate you so much. Sayre, our final question on our mailbag series here today comes in from Payton Manning, which is a very, very unique username. Like that, by the way. He asked the question, can the Broncos steal a win against the Baltimore Ravens or the Kansas City Chiefs? Obviously, with Carolina coming up, you got to take care of that first, but then you start a 2-game road trip where you have back-to-back East Coast time zone kickoffs at 11 a.m. Mountain Time, which is nice, by the way. Can the Broncos steal a win against Baltimore, Kansas City? I mean, I think the evident answer to this, Sayre, is I think, yes, they can, but what does it look like? And if Denver steals one of those 2 games, what does that mean for the trajectory of the rest of the season? It could be very big because these 2 games that are going to come up after the Carolina game are going to be a defining part of this team's season.
Yeah, it looms large. It looms very, very large for this Denver Broncos team. Of course, we saw the Broncos beat the Chiefs finally for the first time in about 100 years last year. We saw that, and it was good to get to see that because they needed that victory. They needed to believe in that locker room that can happen. I know it's a lot of new guys this year, but I mean, Sean Payton has kind of been the streak ender a little bit, hasn't he? We just saw the streak end against the Las Vegas Raiders as well. So I do think that the Broncos can steal a game from either of those teams. Now, will they? I don't know. Going into Baltimore historically is one of the most brutal places to play, and going to Kansas City, of course, as well. But just playing against those teams in general, like that's tough. And it gives you a glimpse of what we just talked about in the previous segment. Like, do the Broncos, what do they need to do to become a contender? Well, how about you prove that you can beat one? How about you prove that you can beat somebody that's a legitimate Super Bowl contender in your own conference? We're going to get a real good sense of what this Broncos team is made of when they go up against these 2 teams. Like, are they going to fall flat? Are they going to, are they just going to get walloped by these guys? And if they do, how do they respond? Like, let's say they get just smacked by the Ravens. How do they respond then against the Kansas City Chiefs? Just like we saw after kind of getting smacked a little bit against the Chargers, then you come back out on a short week and you whoop up on the Saints. Like, do the Broncos have the mental fortitude to be able to come back after getting smacked by a team like Baltimore? Because I mean, Cody, to be honest with you, like, that's a game that when we did our schedule prediction, like, we penciled that one in as a loss, so I think we kind of expect that to be a tough environment to play. If you had, I think another interesting layer to this question too, is like, if you had to pick one, which one would you rather win? Like, if you could only win one of those 2 games, I know we'd love to win them all, but if you could only win one, which one would you rather win at this point? Because that makes it, because the Broncos, if they beat Carolina, they're 5-3. If you lose to the Ravens the next week, you're 5-4, and then you have the matchup against Kansas City that could put you up to 6-4. So would you rather be going up to 6-4 after that Kansas City game, or would you rather be dropping to 6-4 after the Kansas City game? That's an interesting layer to all this.
Well, yeah, and also looking at right now, Denver's 4-3, and Sayre, in every loss they've had this season, obviously the comeback, they were down 20-0 to the Chargers, a couple weeks ago, but their 3 losses have all been by 1 score or less. Like I think that's a promising development, especially against a Seattle team on the road where Bo didn't play great. Denver still had a chance to win that. The Pittsburgh Steelers, Denver played horribly, still had a chance a little bit late in that game. You're an onside kick away from potentially making things interesting against the Chargers. Like, you lose by 1 score and you show some resiliency, you show fight in a lot of those games, and you beat the Jets on the road. You have that resiliency to overcome that. You overcome a little bit of a deficit to the Raiders to beat them. Tampa Bay was your most impressive win of the season. But it's like, okay, you win Sunday's game against Carolina, that puts you at 5-3. Sayre, I'm going to throw this out there. What if Denver beat Baltimore and they beat Kansas City? Okay, now we're talking about Denver being at 7-3 in that situation, which, hey, it doesn't seem likely when you look at it on paper, but it certainly is a possibility. If that's the case, I think it changes the whole conversation about where this team is headed and the perception of them. Because remember, everyone's like, okay, hey, Denver's a year away. You brought up in yesterday's show, the Mike Kliss article, and I can tell you this by talking to players. Players don't believe that they're a year away. They want to win now. They're not just going through the motion of this year saying, hey, we're just going to play this year and hopefully be good next year. They're trying to be good right now, and they're a young team. I think we've all acknowledged that. But if Denver were to hypothetically beat Baltimore, somehow beat Kansas City, which Kansas City is beatable, Sayre. Like, Kansas City, they're not the team that they have been in terms of explosiveness. Patrick Mahomes isn't playing at the explosive level in which he has in terms of the passing game. You look at his statistics, it's pretty rough. But the thing that I'll say about Kansas City, even though that they do not look like the team that they have been, they're still undefeated, and you still can't make mistakes against them. I think that's very evident. We saw it with San Francisco on Sunday. But if Denver somehow finds a way to win these next 3 games, they have a home game against the Falcons after the Chiefs. They're on the road at the Raiders, which, once again, I think Denver can beat them, will beat them. And then you host the Cleveland Browns, who are banged up with injuries and obviously just traded away Amari Cooper. Denver has an opportunity to go on a little bit of a run here. And then you open up after your bye week against the Indianapolis Colts, maybe a revenge game on the road against the Chargers. And then you're on the road at Cincinnati, who is, Joe Burrow's playing good football, but the Bengals as a whole are not playing very good football right now. And then you have a home finale against the Chiefs as well. Denver very well could change the narrative of how everyone is viewing them from a national perspective in these next 3 weeks. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, and it kind of parallels last year a little bit, doesn't it? Where the Broncos are 2-5 after beating Green Bay, and everybody's kind of like, all right, well, yeah, but now here comes the real gauntlet, right? I'm looking at last year's schedule, and it was the Green Bay Packers followed by the Kansas City Chiefs on a just that's tough in itself, right? So you're playing Buffalo, you're playing Minnesota. Cleveland had the number 1 defense in the league last year, going to Houston. So, like, the Broncos went on this 5-game winning streak, which involved back-to-back wins. I know they had the bye week in between, but back-to-back wins against Kansas City and Buffalo. So I don't think it's impossible that it could be done, especially because the Broncos have now, they've had a little bit of a mini bye week here. I don't think they're going to be looking past Carolina for this game because they know like they need this win so badly to just keep pace with Kansas City right now. I think the intensity is going to turn up. We haven't really seen the Broncos in a situation like this, Cody, where, man, they have a winning record going into these big games. Like last year, they were playing spoiler. They were upsetting teams trying to get back to just 500. This time around, they could be 5-3, 6-3. Potentially when they play the Kansas City Chiefs. That is huge just for the mental aspect of things for this team to know going in. Like, not only can we compete with you, but like we actually have a chance to do some damage here, to actually gain some ground and make a difference in the playoff race. I think that will play a huge role in this team just mentally going forward.
Great question sent in from Peyton Manning on YouTube. Broncos Country every week. We'll always do a mailbag episode for you. Stay tuned on Mondays for that. You get the prompt and you get featured into Tuesday's episode every single week. We appreciate you so much, Broncos Country, for tuning in, taking time out of your day to make us your first listen. And if you're not an everyday listener already, make sure you become one by subscribing or follow down below. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL for the latest around the National Football League following Week 7 of all the action. We appreciate it so much. Broncos Country, see you tomorrow for a brand new episode of the show.